The Grand Meridian Hotel's crystal chandelier cast elegant shadows across the marble floor as Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the pristine hallway. It was 6 p.m. on a Friday evening, and the hotel's most exclusive ballroom was being prepared for the Henderson family's lavish 25th wedding anniversary celebration. The event had cost over $200,000, with guests flying in from around the world to attend what society magazines were calling the party of the decade. Maria had been working at the Grand Meridian for 8 years, and she'd seen plenty of wealthy families come and go. But the Hendersons were different. They weren't just rich. They wore their wealth like armor, using it to look down on anyone they deemed beneath them. And in their eyes, hotel staff weren't even worth acknowledging as human beings. What the Henderson family didn't know as they prepared to humiliate Maria in front of 300 distinguished guests was that they were about to learn a lesson in humility that would become legendary in their social circles. They had no idea that the quiet maid they were about to mock had a secret that would leave them speechless and transform their understanding of what true class really means. The evening was about to take a turn that none of them would ever forget. The Henderson family had built their fortune in real estate development, turning their initial $50,000 investment into a billion-dollar empire over 3 decades. Richard Henderson, the patriarch, owned shopping centers across 5 states. His wife, Victoria, spent her time organizing charity galas and serving on museum boards, not out of genuine philanthropy, but because it elevated their social status. Their twin sons, Brandon and Blake, both in their mid-20s, had never worked a day in their lives. They lived off trust funds, drove different luxury cars each month, and treated service workers like props in their privileged existence. The family's philosophy was simple: money equals worth, and those without money simply didn't matter. Maria Santos represented everything the Hendersons looked down upon. She was a 45-year-old Latina woman who cleaned hotel rooms, emptied trash cans, and scrubbed toilets for $12 an hour. She wore a simple uniform, spoke with a slight accent, and lived in a modest apartment 20 minutes away from the gleaming towers where the Hendersons conducted their business. But Maria carried herself with a dignity that no amount of money could buy. She was always polite to guests, helped her coworkers when they struggled, and took pride in her work even when others treated her as invisible. Her supervisor often said that Maria could make a room sparkle better than anyone else on staff, and hotel guests frequently requested her specifically because of her attention to detail and warm demeanor. What the Hendersons couldn't see beneath Maria's uniform was a woman who had overcome obstacles they couldn't imagine. She had immigrated to the United States 15 years earlier, with nothing but determination and a dream of building a better life for her family. She had learned English by watching television after her exhausting work shifts, earned her GED through night school, and was currently taking online college courses while working full-time. As Maria finished preparing the ballroom for the Henderson celebration, she couldn't have imagined that in just 2 hours, she would be standing at the center of attention in front of some of the most powerful people in the city. The collision between her world and theirs was about to create a moment that would change everything. The Henderson anniversary party was everything money could buy. Ice sculptures shaped like swans graced the buffet tables, a 12-piece orchestra played classical music, and guests sipped champagne that cost more per bottle than Maria made in a week. Everyone who mattered in high society was there: senators, CEOs, celebrities, and old money families whose names appeared on museum wings and hospital foundations. Maria had finished her shift and was quietly wheeling her cart toward the service elevator when disaster struck. As she navigated around a group of guests, the wheel on her cart caught on the edge of an expensive Persian rug. The cart tipped, sending cleaning supplies scattering across the marble floor, including a small bottle of glass cleaner that shattered near the feet of Victoria Henderson. The ballroom fell silent. 300 pairs of eyes turned toward Maria as she immediately dropped to her knees, frantically trying to clean up the mess while apologizing profusely. Her face burned with embarrassment, but she maintained her composure, working quickly to restore order. That's when Richard Henderson decided to make an example of her. "Well, well," Richard announced loudly, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "It seems the help has decided to crash our party." Laughter rippled through the crowd, the uncomfortable kind that happens when people don't know how else to react. Victoria joined in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Honestly, Richard, this is exactly why we should have hired a more upscale hotel." The staff here clearly don't understand their place. She gestured dismissively at Maria, who was still cleaning up the broken glass. Some people just weren't raised with proper breeding. But it was Brandon, the older twin, who took the mockery to a cruel level. He pulled out his phone and started recording. Hey everyone, check this out. We're paying $20,000 just for the venue tonight, and this is the quality of service we get. He zoomed in on Maria's face as she continued cleaning. I bet she makes more in tips tonight than she usually sees in a month. Maybe she should thank us for the opportunity to be around her betters. The crowd's laughter grew louder, feeding the family's cruelty. Other guests began taking photos and videos, turning Maria's accident into entertainment for their social media feeds. Hotel security started moving toward the scene, clearly planning to escort Maria away in disgrace. But then something unexpected happened. Dr. Patricia Williams, a respected neurosurgeon and longtime family friend of the Hendersons, stepped forward. Richard, I think you should stop this, she said quietly, but her voice carried authority. You have no idea who you're talking to. Richard waved her off dismissively. Patricia, please. It's just the cleaning lady. She probably doesn't even understand half of what we're saying. That's when Maria slowly stood up, looked directly at Richard Henderson, and said something that sent a shockwave through the ballroom. Mr. Henderson, I understand every word you're saying, and I think it's time you learn something about the people you look down on. The ballroom fell completely silent. Maria's voice had carried a quiet authority that commanded attention, and suddenly everyone was listening. Dr. Williams smiled knowingly and gestured toward the microphone that had been set up for the evening's toast. Maria, Dr. Williams said, I think these people need to hear your story. Maria looked around the ballroom at the faces staring back at her. Some curious, some still smirking, others beginning to look uncomfortable. She had a choice. She could quietly exit and let the humiliation stand, or she could seize this moment to teach these people something they clearly needed to learn. Maria walked to the microphone with the same dignity she brought to everything else in her life. My name is Dr. Maria Santos, she began, her voice clear and confident. And yes, I clean rooms at this hotel, but that's not all I do. The word doctor hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Phones that had been recording mockingly were now capturing something very different. 15 years ago, I came to this country as a refugee from El Salvador. My village had been destroyed in a natural disaster, and my husband had been killed trying to help our neighbors evacuate. I arrived here with my 6-year-old daughter, speaking almost no English, and carrying everything we owned in a single suitcase. The ballroom was so quiet you could hear the crystal chandelier tinkling softly in the air conditioning breeze. I took the job at this hotel because I needed to survive, and I needed to provide for my daughter. But I also had a dream, the same dream that brings people to America from around the world. I wanted to rebuild my life and prove that your circumstances don't define your worth. Maria paused, looking directly at Richard Henderson, whose face had gone pale. While I cleaned your rooms during the day, I studied English at night. While I scrubbed your toilets, I was learning medical terminology. While you were sleeping in beds I had made, I was taking online courses in biochemistry, anatomy, and pharmacology. The crowd was completely captivated now. This wasn't the story they had expected. 3 months ago, I graduated summa cum laude from the University of California with a degree in biomedical engineering. Next month, I start my PhD program in neuroscience research, focusing on developing treatments for traumatic brain injuries. Dr. Williams stepped forward, beaming with pride. Maria is being funded by a full scholarship from the Martinez Foundation for her groundbreaking research proposal on neural regeneration. Her preliminary work has already caught the attention of researchers at Johns Hopkins and Mayo Clinic. But Maria wasn't finished. The cleaning job I do here? It's not because I have to anymore. I keep working here because this hotel gave me a chance when no one else would, because my coworkers became my family when I had no one else, and because I believe that honest work, any honest work, is something to be proud of, not ashamed of. She looked around the ballroom at faces that were now showing shame, amazement, and respect in equal measure. But here's what I really want you to understand. Every day I interact with people who treat me like I'm invisible. They see the uniform, hear my accent, and make assumptions about my intelligence, my worth, and my dreams. They never ask my name, Never wonder about my story. Never consider that I might be someone's mother, someone's daughter, someone with hopes and fears just like them. Maria's voice grew stronger as she continued. Tonight you all laughed when I made a mistake. You recorded it for your entertainment. You used my moment of embarrassment to make yourselves feel superior. But the person you were mocking, she's published research papers. She speaks 4 languages. She's raised a daughter who's now in medical school herself, planning to become a pediatric surgeon. The silence in the ballroom was now profound and uncomfortable. Money can buy you many things, Maria said, looking directly at the Henderson family. It can buy you beautiful parties, expensive clothes, and social status, but it cannot buy you class, compassion, or character. Those things come from how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. The truth is, Mr. Henderson, that everyone is important. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves basic human dignity, regardless of what job they do or how much money they make. And until you learn that lesson, all the wealth in the world won't make you truly rich. What happened next was something no one in the ballroom would ever forget. Dr. Patricia Williams began to applaud. Slowly, other guests joined in until the entire ballroom was giving Maria a standing ovation. The same people who had been laughing at her minutes earlier were now applauding her courage, her achievements, and her dignity in the face of cruelty. But the Henderson family stood frozen, their faces reflecting a mixture of shame, shock, and the dawning realization of how badly they had misjudged the situation. Richard Henderson, a man who had never apologized to a service worker in his life, walked slowly to the microphone as Maria stepped aside. His voice was shaking as he spoke. Dr. Santos, Maria, I owe you an apology that I'm not sure I can adequately express. What my family and I did tonight was inexcusable, and you responded with more grace and dignity than we deserved. He looked out at his guests, many of whom were wiping away tears after hearing Maria's story. We came here tonight to celebrate 25 years of marriage, but instead we've learned something much more valuable about what it means to be truly successful in life. Maria, you've achieved more with less than we've achieved with everything, and you've done it while maintaining your integrity and compassion. Victoria Henderson, visibly emotional, stepped forward. Maria, I am deeply ashamed of my behavior tonight. You are clearly an extraordinary woman, and I treated you terribly. I would like to make amends if you'll let me. But it was Brandon who surprised everyone the most. The young man who had been recording Maria's humiliation pulled out his phone again. But this time he deleted the cruel video he had taken and instead began recording his own apology. I want everyone to see this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I want them to see me apologizing to someone who showed more class in 5 minutes than I've shown in 25 years. Dr. Santos, you've taught me something tonight that I'll never forget. The impact of Maria's speech extended far beyond that evening. Dr. Williams, who had known about Maria's background through her own charitable work, helped arrange for several prominent guests to learn more about Maria's research. Within weeks, Maria had received additional funding offers for her PhD program and invitations to present her work at prestigious conferences. The Henderson family, deeply affected by the experience, established a scholarship fund for immigrant students pursuing higher education while working full-time jobs. They named it the Maria Santos Scholarship for Academic Excellence and Character. But perhaps most importantly, the story of that night spread throughout their social circles, becoming a powerful reminder about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. Several other wealthy families began volunteering at immigrant services organizations and supporting educational programs for working adults. Maria continued working at the hotel for 2 more months until she started her PhD program. On her last day, the entire staff threw her a surprise party, and management presented her with a plaque recognizing her years of exemplary service and her inspiring achievement. The hotel's general manager also instituted new policies requiring respectful treatment of all staff members and began offering educational assistance programs for employees pursuing degrees. Maria's daughter, Isabella, did indeed become a pediatric surgeon, inspired by her mother's example of perseverance and dignity. Together, they started a foundation providing educational support for children of immigrant families. As for the Henderson family, they became known not just for their wealth, but for their transformation into genuine philanthropists who used their resources to support education and immigrant services. Richard often told people that the most valuable lesson he ever learned came from a hotel maid who turned out to be one of the most accomplished people he'd ever met.